Early Breakfast with Rosie Wright on Times Radio.
16 minutes past 5. At the front page of the Times this morning is that story, the warning there from the National Cybersecurity Centre about the rise of China as a technology superpower and what might the repercussions be of that. The Daily Telegraph says single-sex schools can refuse trans pupils. Teachers will not have to call children by chosen pronouns under official guidance. There's been quite a lot of disquiet about the fact that schools haven't, they say, had advice from the government about how to handle some of these issues. Well, details on the front page of the Telegraph. The Guardian says energy firms face curbs on forced meter installations. The Mail says, which genius thought it was a good idea to terrify the whole country at 3 p.m. on a Sunday? That's going to be the test of the national alarm that we're going to get on our phones. And finally, The Express says, reasons to be cheerful, the economy is on the mend. Joining me to go through some of these stories in a bit more detail is Andrew Eborn, barrister, broadcaster and president of Octopus TV. Andrew, I believe you're in sunny Cannes.
I am. Yes, we can. Absolutely. It's a joy to join you again. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. Do you think it really is such an outrage that at 3 p.m. on Sunday, everybody's phones are going to get this alert?
I think people are going to start panicking, aren't they? I mean, it was Edward Bernays who said the greatest way of selling anything is through fear. And if people don't really know what's going on and not everybody's going to hear the relevant news, then it will cause panic. And people are asking the questions, well, why do we need everybody to be alarmed all of a sudden? And I think they need to sort of help with the narrative, talk about, okay, can this be on a local alert? If it's a local issue, is that what's going to happen? So it'd be interesting. I think they need to put a bit more detail in as to when these alarms will be used and what sort of information will be given.
I think one of the big concerns, particularly that driving organisations have said, well, at 3 p.m. on Sunday, lots of people, whilst in their car, are going to get surprised and get this alarm. I think they're going to put some signs up on the motorway to try and manage people's expectations as much as possible. But yes, it's definitely designed to alarm and get your attention. That might not be helpful if you're behind the wheel.
Yes, absolutely right.
Andrew, front page of the papers have got photographs. Let's just have a bit of a reminder. This is the BBC commentary of what happened last night at the World Snooker Championships.
Everybody trying to enjoy the snooker. I've never seen anything like this in 25 years of watching or working on the Crucible Theatre snooker. Well, clearly those pictures...
That was a Just Stop Oil protester who stopped play. I mean, not only stopped, significantly disrupted it, got on top of the snooker table, covered it in orange powder. Andrew, what do you make of their tactics?
I think their tactics are deplorable. It's P.T. Barnum who said, if you want to draw a crowd, start a fight. And the trouble is, it looks a glorious picture, sadly. It looks as an orange dye against the green baize and so on and so forth. But people absolutely have the right to protest, but they have to do it within the law. Quite simply, this is criminal damage. And what they said, and they put it out on their Twitter account, new oil and gas will snooker us. Okay, nice play on words and so on and so forth. But the disruption, the tactics that they're using to get their message across, quite frankly, is deplorable. Absolutely the right to protest, but do so within the law.
And the challenge that always comes up with this is what type of demonstration, from their perspective, causes a stir, gets them this type of level of press coverage, unless they do pull off stunts like this.
Yes, and I absolutely, and that's what's happened. It's splashed over the front pages. I say it's a glorious photograph in any other circumstances. But the reality is that they caused this massive disruption for a major event. The Crucible Theatre in Sheffield, as they say, nothing's happened like this in 25 years. The match between Joe Perry and Robert Milkins, I think it had to be suspended. And it begs all sorts of questions about security and so on and so forth at these events. And it's an outrage. But because it is an outrage, it's drawing lots of media attention.
Let me know what you think at home. You can text me 87222, start your message with the word Times. What peaceful protest makes an impact? The front page of the Telegraph, Andrew, single-sex schools can refuse trans pupils. It says they won't be forced to accommodate transgender pupils under government guidelines that are going to be issued within weeks. Does that sound like the right approach to you?
Well, it's such a politically and otherwise charged subject matter and has to be handled with incredible sensitivity for all concerned. And the schools basically needed reassurance as to what they should do to stay within law. And they were very concerned about breaching the Equalities Act of 2010. Well, guidance has now been drawn up by Gillian Keegan, the Education Secretary, and Kerry Badenoch, the Equalities Minister. And basically what they're saying is it's going to apply to all state and independent schools, and they can refuse, single-sex schools can refuse trans pupils, and they also don't have to use the chosen pronouns. Now, the worrying thing about gender dysphoria, there's been a dramatic increase in the number of pupils who say they are trans. I think it's from 2021 to 2022. The NHS has reported there were more than 5,000 referrals to the Gender Identity Development Service, which is run by the Tavistock Foundation. And this is up from just 250 a decade earlier. So it's obviously a serious issue. Schools are concerned about it. Those pupils affected, obviously, it's incredibly sensitive for them. So it's difficulty, but there is, as far as the schools are concerned, a bit more clarity.
Yeah, well, those policies to come, and some very difficult decisions being made by schools trying to be sensitive and inclusive, but to make decisions that protect all pupils, all parents, and the safety of what's happening in the classroom. And I think what you touched on there, Andrew, is a bigger question. Why is it that over the last 5 years there has been such an increase in pupils suffering from what they are describing as gender distress?
Yeah, no, and it's absolutely right. And those who are affected and genuinely affected, it's appalling. It's really, really tough on them. But I don't know if it's a trend. And there's a lot of people just suggesting when you get more media reporting, so more people sort of turn around and say, well, I want to identify as the opposite gender, as opposed to a sort of biological sex and so on and so forth. So I think the more that you report things, it's rather like reports of crimes. I think the more that people report it, the more that others report it as well. So there is a factor in that. Damn lies and statistics is what they say. But the increase is dramatic. It's now 5,000 as opposed to 250 a decade ago. It's huge.
Front page of The Guardian, Andrew, let's move on, is talking about the force fitting of prepayment meters. And it says energy firms face curbs, and that anyone over 85, they will not be in a situation where the company comes in and says, right, the prepayment meter is in place. It was actually some journalism, undercover reporting by The Times that revealed some of the practices that were taking part. Do you think there are enough protections in place for the most vulnerable when it comes to securing the very basics, things like getting food, being able to turn their heating on?
I have to say the reports about people being forced to have these prepayment meters were, again, absolutely appalling. And the contractors engaged to go along and knock on people's houses, and they tend to be the most vulnerable in society, and being forced in this sort of thing, and people joking about it, the contractors and so on and so forth. I think it is appalling. So in terms of safeguards, we need to make sure there are those safeguards. Everybody deserves to be treated with respect, and everybody needs to have that, as you say, this very, very basic service.
85, that's quite old. I was actually, I think, expecting maybe that number to be something a little bit lower, because, how are we defining who is a vulnerable person?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And it's also not just age. Vulnerability can come at any age, depending on people's challenges in their own life. So it goes back to what we said beforehand about respect and sensitivity in how we deal with people. People need to be dealt with appropriately and always with respect, and always very, very sensitive for their own particular challenges.
Now, Andrew, you are, you call yourself a futurist. Perhaps you can explain that to us. But the future looks very different in terms of our creative world because of AI. I played a little clip earlier of this song that's been generating millions of hits online that was supposedly a collaboration between Drake and The Weeknd, which is nothing of the sort. There is a real storm brewing in the music industry where AI could be duping someone's voice like Beyonce or Rihanna and getting them to sing new songs. And what impact is this going to have on not just the sort of top 40 charts, but the music industry as a whole?
Oh, absolutely. Well, Futurist, basically, we're looking at patterns in history and using those patterns to predict the future, but also talking about technological advances, about AI and robotics and so on and so forth. So actually, whilst I'm in Cannes, I'm talking about that, about tech and creativity. So it's absolutely bang on the money. Well, Universal Music Group, who control about a third of the global music market, are increasingly worried about artificial intelligence because you can replicate anybody's voice, and it's almost indistinguishable from the real thing. And you're also hitting the headlines. The devil may wear Prada, but the Pope prefers puffers, if you believe the images which are done. So the real question is, you do have to question everything. It was Stephen Hawking who said that the advance of AI is probably our greatest human achievement, but also our biggest existential threat. We need to understand the technology and make sure the commercial models are there to actually benefit from it. So I'm working with lots of organisations, rights owners, helping them navigate these interesting waters so we can actually turn it into an advantage. So if you think as an artist, you could appear in many different locations on the same night and actually earn money whilst you're actually sitting at home because holograms are doing it instead of you personally. And similarly, you can have all sorts of collaborations, creating new music with different artists using artificial intelligence. That's the way to approach it. But make sure that the law and regulations keep up with the technology.
I did see the ABBA show, which used holograms, which I did find genuinely incredible. But part of that is the novelty factor, isn't it? And how much do we all want to, Elton John's just about to finish his great, fantastic tour. But, in sort of 10 years, is part of the excitement of it, the novelty. How much do we really want to go and see pretend sort of projections of our favourite pop stars?
Well, I can tell you, the way to do it properly with holograms is not to tell people it's a hologram, because it is indistinguishable.
You can't do that. Just pretend.
Well, that's what you do. If you look, it's like a magic illusion. I'm a member of the Magic Circle as well. No way, you don't tell people that they're not really being cut in half. You complete the illusion. And you can combine holograms, holographic reproductions, with real people on the stage. So you can have live dancers, and while the hologram plays as well, and making that make sense. So the basic sort of principle is exactly that, is don't destroy the illusion. The avatar, which you mentioned, is brilliant, but you don't need to tell people they're avatars. It is the best performance every night. You don't have to worry about riders and so on and so forth. You really have the opportunity to make a huge difference in the entertainment sphere.
I fundamentally disagree with you that you can just not tell the audience. Andrew, what are you doing for the coronation?
Well, I'm going to be tempted by this glorious, wonderful, crispy quiche. Give us a quiche. That's what they talk about, isn't it? I celebrate in style all the time, and I think there's some wonderful concerts going on. But there's a tradition, isn't there, that 70 years after the coronation, chicken graced our wonderful things. The king and the queen, consort, soon to be just the queen, have announced this wonderful quiche, which is a spinach and broad bean and tarragon with a little bit of cheese thrown in. It was done, which I rather like, in discussion with the royal chef, who is gloriously called Mark Flanagan. Fantastic stuff. So,
do you know, look, I made the trifle that we were supposed to make last summer, and it took about 5.5 hours. I didn't think the taste was amazing at the end. And part of the length of time was because you had to set a jelly halfway through.
Lemon and amaretti, wasn't it? Platinum pudding, we love it, yeah.
So I'm going to give the coronation quiche a go this weekend, but some people are saying it's perhaps a little bit uninspired.
Well, there's cheese as well. There's reports about little cheese going into this, and the price of cheese going up by about 80% if you're going for the Dragon Welsh mature cheddar in it. So that's gone up by 80%.
How exciting is a tarragon and bean and cheese quiche? I don't know.
Oh, I love that. I tell you what, tarragon chicken. If you combine the coronation chicken with tarragon, that would be glorious, because tarragon's a wonderful flavour.
Right.
So I think it can be quite exciting. I think you're right. Give us a quiche, fantastic stuff. But it's sort of what they say about it. It's a good sharing dish.
And it is, and hot or cold, so you don't have to worry about temperature if you're having a street party or whatever you might be doing. Andrew, thank you very much. If you've got a suggestion that might beat the Coronation quiche, then let me know. A very good morning to Adrian Jackson, who says, protesters, speaking of Just Stop Oil, we've been discussing how appropriate their tactics are. Adrian says protesters should be personally liable for all costs incurred by organisers and broadcasters. Would that deter them? I wonder what the budgets and the finances look like behind the scenes at Just Stop Oil. You can have your say as well. Text 87222. Start your message with the word Times. Are you in support of the organisers' tactics? Let me know. A huge thanks to Andrew Eborn for going through the papers with me today. Very shortly, we're looking in a little bit more detail with tech correspondent Will Guyett at what AI just is quite doing to our creative industries. That's all to come.
Across the UK, on DAB, online and on your smart speaker. This is Times Radio.
Right now it's 5:31. Eleanor Sherwood.